Good morning. Welcome to Market Day Report. It's midweek, and let's jump into the markets. Overnight trade action for corn. Where are we? Up 2 3/4. Front month December at 431 3/4, and the March contract at 449, trading 2.5 higher. What about the soybean trade in the overnight session? Double-digit losses nearly across the board, with the November at 1045 3/4, off 11.5, and a dime lower on the May at 1092 3/4. Wheat market, winter wheat planted according to USDA approaching 40%. December Chicago 606 1/4, up 7 1/4. New crop July. What's going in the ground now? 643 3/4, up 6 3/4. Hard red up 8 1/4 on the old crop, 606 1/2, with the crop that's going in right now, 637 1/2. That's July, up 7 3/4. What about spring wheat? 5.5 higher on the D's at 640 1/4. And finally, the cotton market 30 points higher on December at 73.39. Brian Hoops is president, Midwest Market Solutions. Okay, what's on your radar as we start Wednesday?
Well, good morning, Tony. Glad to have you back. We've been talking for the last week and a half to 2 weeks, this time frame, that seemingly every morning at 8:30, there's some fund or someone or maybe a bunch of funds stepping in and buying the markets aggressively, no matter what happens in the overnight, whether we're up 1 or 2 cents, whether we're down 10 cents like we are this morning. That opening gets bought and prices move higher. At some point, that pattern will change, and that won't be the case. Will that be today? We're down very hard in meal overnight, and I think part of that was yesterday's census crush numbers that came out. They were right in line with expectations, but sharply lower than what we saw in July, as a lot of plants were closed here for maintenance during the last month. But also the weather patterns are starting to change, and each day we get closer to the projected rains that are coming in Mato Grosso and parts of Argentina. That adds a little confidence to those forecasts. And at some point, I think it's going to be really hard to ignore the fact that we're going to see these rains in South America, especially in Mato Grosso and northern Brazil, where they're planting a lot of the crop right now. That's going to be beneficial. And you also look here in the U.S., we have open weather. We have yields probably on the rise. 2 days ago, a private firm came out and increased their yields to 184.5. Yesterday, FC Stone, the old FC Stone, StoneX, came out yesterday afternoon. They increased yields for corn and for soybeans both, and increased production. So it's kind of looking like, as we go into next week's supply and demand report, trade is going to be expecting an increase in corn yields, possibly soybean yields as well. And our balance sheets don't look all that bullish, especially when we start talking about soybean ending stocks. 575 to 600 million bushel carryover with a big South American crop being planted. It's going to be hard to sustain these prices, I feel, given that fundamental information, even though the technicals right now are very bullish.
And we have to keep in mind the problems we're seeing now on the Mississippi River, with rates rising to their highest levels since last September. Hang on. We're going to come back and talk cattle and hogs, and we'll throw milk in there too as we come back and visit with Brian Hoops. This is Market Day Report. Welcome back to Market Day Report. Now, we don't trade the livestock futures in the overnight session, but we did trade yesterday. How did we close? Well, let's start with live cattle. Up 70 on the October, 184.47. December, 37 higher, 185.17. Cash cattle last week in the South was 185, 186 to 187 in the North. And we're hearing that show list in Texas and Kansas higher this week. A little softer, though, in Nebraska. Live cattle, again, up 70 yesterday at 184.47. Now for the feeders, it was a nickel lower on October, 246.15, and the November at 244.67, off 22. Hog trade, buck and a quarter higher on October, 83.50, with the December at 74.60, up a buck 32, even $1.20 higher on the February contract. And Class 3 milk futures just back from World Dairy Expo in Madison. October Class 3 milk 23.07, down 3, 12 lower on November at 22.49. We bring back in Brian Hoops with Midwest Market Solutions. And the tie back in with the milk is the fact that we've seen numbers that we're putting in feedlots remain steady, in part because of that beef on dairy mix. Is that playing a role in keeping our numbers where they are? Could we be much tighter as far as a herd if we didn't have that?
Yeah, Tony, I see what your point you're making, and you look at the price of those milk values. Those are some decent prices, really good prices recently. So hopefully the producers out there can make some money at those price levels. The cash markets this week, it looks like we're going to be higher this week in the cash markets. We're hearing some offers at 186. The October futures rallied yesterday, anticipating that 186 level. I think at least a dollar type higher trade. The cutout values have been stronger this week, which we couldn't count on because last week was mostly lower. This week it's responded to seeing higher prices here, and the show list numbers down over 5,000 head overall. So it bodes well that we would have at least steady, probably higher cash trades. So we're looking for that market to advance a little bit more, maybe some cash trade develop tomorrow, not necessarily today. The hog weights that came out this morning, a little bit negative, a little bit of a jump, almost half a pound from last week, 2.2 pounds heavier than the year ago levels. We would expect that to continue. We mentioned the crush report that came out yesterday. A lot of that corn was being used for ethanol, but in the stocks report last week, I think not only do we see a lot of ethanol usage, but we also saw a lot of feed usage for corn. And that feed usage here is one of the components that we're seeing for heavier weights for both the beef sector, pork sector as well. Weights are increasing, which is longer term a little bit of a negative factor for the industry to try and overcome because it just gives us more supply to work through.
Brian, always great to have you on. We'll see you back in here tomorrow. Brian Hoops with Midwest Market Solutions.